Hey everyone, my name is Paul. I'm one of the teaching pastors here at Epic, and we are in a series called No Regerts. Part 1 was geared toward anybody who is single. Part 2 is geared toward people who are married, and both were about how to make some decisions you won't regret. So if you missed those, you definitely want to catch up on them. And today, Part 3 is for people who are a little further along in life, those of us who are a little more seasoned. There's another word I could use, but it's become kind of a dirty word. Are you ready for it? No, someone said. Older. Older. A lot of people don't like this word, right? Old, or don't like to think about growing older. I think in some ways this has been true of humans all throughout history. There have been people who have been afraid of growing older, who have been fascinated with staying younger, searching for the fountain of youth. Man, I think that the culture that we live in right now only makes it worse. You know, for us, old is bad. And everything that you look around, the messages that we're receiving is old is bad. We're obsessed with new. We want to update and upgrade everything as often as possible. If someone has a phone that's older than a few years maybe, people treat them like they're using something that should be in a museum. And we're treating getting old like it's all about losing our looks. And so we do everything we can to keep the wrinkles at bay, to keep our hair from changing color, to keep looking the way we did when we were younger. But what is old anyway? So if you didn't know this, I teach middle school writing. So I asked some of my middle school students what it meant to be old. Are you ready for this? So here's one student. He wrote, "It means all you talk about is the good old days." That's what it means to be old, to that one. Another one said, "You can tell you're old when you forget things that happen in your life." If that's the case, then I am super old because my memory is shot. So according to them, I'm old. Another student wrote, "You hurt everywhere. You bend over and your knees and your back hurt." Yeah, I had friends in college who were already talking about how everything hurts. So I was thinking, man, you better buckle up. It's going to get, whew. Here's another one says, "Being older means you have gray hair." You know what? Well, I'll say this. Here's what Scripture has to say about your hair color, okay? Gray hair is a crown of splendor. Yeah, that's right. You can clap for that. So from now on, don't say gray hair like it's a bad thing, okay? It's not gray hair. You can say, "Oh, you mean my crown of splendor?" That's right. You're welcome. That one's for free. And so here's the last thing that I'll bring up. Listen to what this kid wrote. "Being old," he put it in quotation marks, "means you are changing from the you that you're used to. You are able to do more things and able to do less at the same time. It also makes you wiser." The word old just means you are experienced. That's not bad, right? That's pretty good. A little too good. So my teacher radar goes off when it's something like this. I got to make sure he didn't Google that. I think he's good, though. I think he actually came up with this. So I love what he said, though. Honestly, you're changing from the you used to be. You can't do some of the things you used to be able to do, but you can do things you couldn't before. You're wiser, and probably you're wiser because you're more experienced. And so that's the unique spot you find yourself in if you have more years under your belt. Every day, you're adding to your collection of experiences. You have more experiences now than you did when you were 40 or 30 or 20. And that experience can either be a tool for good, or, I think this is true too, that experience can be a source of pain for us. It can be something that weighs us down or drags us down. And so today, as we are in this series, No Regerts, and we're talking about regret, I want to explore some questions. Like, how about this? What if I already have regrets? Like, we've been talking about kind of how to avoid regrets, but what if I already have regrets? I've been through a lot of stuff. What do I do with the mistakes that I've made, the things that I'm already not proud of? When we ask ourselves, or maybe you've ever thought this, like, I wish I would have done that differently. Like, I wish I could have done that differently. So we're going to talk about that and what to do with the regrets we have, which, by the way, is for everybody, not just older people. But if you are in a stage of life now where you may not be able to do some things you could before, The good news is that you can do some things you couldn't before. And so what does it mean then for us to do this well? What does it mean to make the most out of wherever we are in life? And so we want to look at these questions. And so to do this, we're going to take a look at someone from Scripture who we get to see go from someone who thought he knew a bunch of stuff as a younger guy to then he found out that he was completely wrong about a bunch of stuff, and then found a way to continue to make a difference even into old age. And this guy's name was Paul. And you may have heard of him referred to as Saint Paul or the Apostle Paul. The New Testament in our Bible is made up of a bunch of letters that Paul wrote to various churches and to people later in his life, actually. So one of those letters is one that we now call 1 Corinthians. So it's the first letter that he sent to a church in Corinth, and he wrote this letter in his late 40s. And in one part of the letter, Paul shares his greatest regret in life. And here's what he says. For I am the least of the apostles, and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. And now there's a little bit of backstory to this. So by this point in his 40s, Paul's a pretty big deal. He's well known, he's well respected in the early church. He's been all over the place, telling and teaching everyone he can about Jesus, about how he died for us, about how he rose again, about how life with Jesus presents us with a better way. And he's carried his message further than anyone has before him, and people considered him to be an apostle already. So he has authority and credibility beyond the average person. But here he is in this letter saying that, okay, any recognition that you might give me, any applause that you might give me, like if any of you were impressed with me in any kind of way, can I just say something? I feel like I'm the least deserving of that. Like, I feel like I'm the least deserving to be doing what I'm doing or to be standing where I'm standing. Why? Because I persecuted the church of God. And now, you may not know very much about the Apostle Paul. And even if you've been a follower of Jesus for a while, I think it's really easy to fall into this trap of just thinking of him as a flat character or just as a name that we reference every once in a while. And I think what happens is we come to church and then someone says, well, Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians. And in your brain, I think it registers the same as, well, according to Wikipedia. But here's the thing. Paul was a person. Paul was a person like you, like me. So I think it might be helpful today for us to view him and his story that way. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the timeline of his life in a nutshell. So he was born in about 6 AD. When he was a teenager, he went to study under a well-known rabbi named Gamaliel, and he became a Pharisee, which is this particular sect of Judaism. And so you can think about these years as like he was getting his education as a teenager. And in his 20s as a Pharisee, he devoted himself to hunting Christians and eradicating what he saw as a threat to his religion and to his way of life. And he had Christians dragged out of their homes, arrested, executed, and that's what he gave his life to as a 20-something adult, the same way that some of us give our lives to our jobs or our careers or something like that. He gave his life to this. And so around the age of 30, while he was traveling to a place called Damascus, and it was actually on the way to hunt down some Christians and drag them back to Jerusalem, he meets Jesus. Like literally on the road, he meets Jesus and it changes his life. And so at that point, around the age of 30, he spends the next couple of decades, his 30s and his 40s, telling everyone he can about Jesus. So he went everywhere. I think the list of places that he traveled, the mileage that he racked up during this time would give him like elite traveler status with American Airlines or whatever. Like he's been all over, okay? But churches were formed all over the place. People's lives were changed because of what he started to do in his 30s and his 40s. And at the age of about 50 or 51, he was arrested and imprisoned, and he would spend most of the next decade in chains until the Roman Emperor Nero ordered his execution at about the age of 60. And so I bring all of this up so that we can think about Paul the person. Like Paul the teenager who went to study under Gamaliel and probably, like most of us, wanted to do something good with his life. Do you know what I mean? He just wanted to do something. He wanted to make a difference. He dreamed probably of doing the right thing, you know? But then he spent his 20s convinced that he was doing the right thing until he has this wake-up call at 30, and he realizes that he was wrong. And now in his late 40s, he reveals that he doesn't feel qualified, like he doesn't feel like he deserves to make it where he has because of what he did in his 20s, because of the mistakes that he made earlier in his life. So anyone who looks back on your younger self and sees how wrong you were, you get what Paul is saying here. You get what Paul is saying. Like the things that you did, the things you said, the things you believed at 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 or 35, and you thought you were so right. You thought you were so right. You thought you were so justified. You thought you were so sure. You thought you were so smart. But now you can see clearly that you were wrong. And it might be something silly, like one of my buddies just told me that when he was younger, he and his friends would go skiing for the day, but they wouldn't bring any food with them, and they wouldn't spend their money on food either because they were trying to save it so they could go skiing again the next day. So instead of actually just buying food or anything like that, they would make soup. I use soup very loosely here. They would make soup from the condiments that were available in the lodge. So, you could get like free hot water. So they would take hot water and then put ketchup in it, and that's what they would eat. That's just wrong, man. That's wrong on multiple levels. So it might be something like that, silly/disgusting, or maybe it's something more serious. Maybe it's something that you did or you said or believed that really, truly hurt someone or a bunch of people in your life. Maybe it's something that you did or said or believed that hurt yourself. Maybe it's something that made your life way more difficult than it needed to be for way longer than it needed to be. And for a lot of people here, there might be a lot of shame, a lot of regret still weighing on you because of these mistakes that you made. And it's guilt or shame or regret that reveals itself in the anxiety that you experience, or the anger you experience, or the way you view or treat yourself, or what you ultimately settle for when it comes to like what's best for you. Or it reveals itself in the way you try to compensate for what happened by trying to prove yourself or working too hard. Or it reveals itself in the way you punish someone else in your life and take it out on them. So what do we do with that? Like, what do we do when we're still haunted in some way by our regrets or our mistakes or the things that we could have done or should have done? So the Apostle Paul, when he's writing this, I think what this reveals is a little bit of, it's like he's like any of us, where he hears this voice. It's a voice that's very similar to one that many of us hear, that says to him, "Who are you?" You know? Have you ever heard that voice ever talking to you? The one that says, like, who are you? Who are you? Like, you don't deserve any of this. You don't deserve this. Who are you? And so in the face of that shame, that regret, that voice that's talking to him and telling him that he's a fraud, here's what Paul writes. And this line is so great. "But by the grace of God, I am what I am." That's just like an amazing line. By the grace of God, I am what I am. And then I love this next part. And his grace to me was not without effect, so it's not wasted. No, I actually, because of this grace, because I understand who I am, because of this grace, I actually worked harder than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God that was in me. By the grace of God, I am who I am. And that's a pretty good answer for when that voice comes to you and says, "Who are you? Who are you?" By the grace of God, I am. I actually think that it's important enough for us to know this, because for a lot of us, the answer to the question, "Who are you?" is based on a lot of unreliable sources. For a lot of us, the answer to that is what we do for work, or how much we do at work, or how well we do at work, or it's how much money we make, or it's how liked we are by the people around us. It's how good we can make everything on the outside look, you know? And when any of those things goes wrong for us, our answer to who are you becomes things like, I'm a fraud. I'm a loser. I'm the worst. I'm worthless. But when shame and regret say, who are you? And you see yourself not through those lenses, but through the grace of God, through God's eyes, here's what you can now say. When you hear that voice, it says, who are you? You can say this, that, hey, I am a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. I'm not a slave to anything, especially not shame or regret. I'm a child of God. I've been made in the image of God, and it's all because of the grace of God. And I think this is the beauty of the grace of God. It takes what could have sunk you, it takes what could have buried you, it takes what could have been a waste, and it makes something beautiful and worthwhile. And think about the timeline of Paul's life. After he becomes a follower of Jesus at age 30, he devotes his life from that moment all the way until the end of his life to the gospel. And so his success is pretty hard to argue with. Most of our New Testament was written by him, and here we are millennia later, still talking about it, still studying it, still getting life from it. And I think that it would be naive to think that he was as successful as he was completely despite his mistakes that he made in his 20s. I would argue that it's at least partially because of the mistakes that he made in his 20s. And it's because of this. He realized that he had spent so much time chasing the wrong things in life. Because he had realized that he had gotten it so wrong, he was even more devoted to making sure that people would not make the same mistakes that he did. He wanted to make sure as many people as possible could realize what he didn't realize in his 20s, which is how essential, how necessary, how much better life with Jesus is. And so he was so motivated by what he learned from his mistakes that even in his 50s, he didn't slow down. And actually, because he didn't slow down in his 50s, that's why he was arrested. He was arrested for the work that he was doing to spread the gospel. And even while he was in prison, in chains, he was old. He should have been playing golf every day at this point. He was still keeping in touch with people, teaching them about Jesus. 4 of the letters in our New Testament were written while Paul was in prison. Think about that. So Paul experienced God's grace at every stage in his life. The grace of God that would take his mistakes and use them for something greater than he could have ever imagined. The grace of God that would allow him to make such an impact on people's lives even while he was old and in prison. And it's the grace of God that for all of us will take the junk and the mess and the crud of our lives and transform it in ways that you could not plan for. And please know this today, that your lowest points can be fertilizer for the greatest growth in your life. All of that junk, all of that crud, it can be the fertilizer for the greatest growth in your life. If there's something in your past that still brings up shame and regret, is there something that you think, I wish I could have, I should have? I'm telling you that it can be used for good. At the very least, to teach people in your life what you've learned from your mistakes, and it matters. That matters. So if there's something that you're facing now, something that makes you think like, why is this happening? At some point, I promise you this, at some point, someday, maybe not soon, but someday, you will see something good and beautiful come out of it. This is something else that the Apostle Paul wrote while he was in prison in a letter to the Philippian church. He says, I will continue to rejoice, which I think is funny because he's kind of in prison. So you're just saying like, oh, you were already rejoicing? Okay, I don't know if I would do that. But he says, I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. That what has happened to me will turn out. Not like, it might, maybe. It will turn out for my deliverance. He's expressing this like unwavering belief that even now, even this, even being in prison will end up turning out for my deliverance, for my salvation. And the funny thing is, a little bit later, he actually acknowledges this. It might mean that I die. It might mean that I live. Either way, I know that this is going to turn out for good. And Paul's not naive here. Paul's speaking from almost 60 years of experience. Paul is speaking as someone who's experienced like again and again and again and again how the grace of God makes something beautiful and good out of the darkest, messiest stuff in his life. And he says, I know it's going to happen here too. And so if you want a simpler, kind of more straightforward way to think about this and remember this, I would word it like this. Everything is a lesson. You may have heard this before, like everything is a lesson. People will say something like everything teaches or everything preaches or whatever it might be, but everything is a lesson. Everything can teach you and everything can help you grow. I think that this is extremely true, but here's the follow-up to this, the very important follow-up. Everything is a lesson if you choose it to be that way. Everything is a lesson if you choose to make it that way. It's a decision that you make, and a lot of us don't make it. You might be skeptical. And I understand that. There's some of you, you're cynical about this statement. You're like, no. I would even acknowledge that it might be really, really hard for you right now to want to find the lesson in whatever is happening to you or whatever has happened to you. And I get that. But people who grow the most, people who are the most joyful, people who find a way to get through just about anything that life throws at them, simply choose to believe this. They simply choose to find a lesson in everything. They choose to believe that everything can teach us something. They choose to believe that good will come out of this. And if you're a follower of Jesus, what this looks like is you're trusting the grace of God to take your lowest points and make something good grow from them. And I've seen this in my life so much. I've seen this in so many people's lives, my friends, my family, and people right here at this church. And so I actually want you to hear, I'm really excited for this. I actually want you to hear from someone who's going to put it better than I can, and we're going to hear a story from someone named Anna, and she goes to our Fairmount location. I just want you to check this out.
My name is Anna Maria Watson, and I go to Fairmount. I was really, really lost in this world. Always looking for love in the wrong places, always doing things that made me feel less than who I really was. Starting from the time I was 8, my mom was very abusive. She was a raging alcoholic. She owned her own business, so whatever happened there came home. And I was always the brunt of that anger and those mistakes that other people made. Love always came in that same manner of abuse, you know. At 16, I got pregnant. I had my son, and I knew I had to do things different. Having a child at 16 was the biggest struggle of my life, but I still went to school. I went to school for unwed moms. I took my son to school with me every day. He went to daycare next door, and I went to class. And I was determined to do what I needed to do to make sure my son was okay. Life was a struggle, and I knew there had to be something better. I think I was angry at myself so long that I allowed so many things to happen and to be done to me, that one day I woke up and I just felt God's presence. And I just remember hearing him say, "You're forgiven and you are loved." Ever since then, I knew I was a daughter of a king, and I treated myself that way. I woke up feeling that way. I walked that way. I talked that way. And I learned to love myself. I looked in the mirror and I said, "You are more than what people thought you were. And you are a daughter of a king. Allow yourself to be loved." And loving my children the way I do, and loving my grandchildren the way I do, helps them know how to love also. Because when you didn't learn it, you can't teach it. But when you learn it yourself, personally, and you move it forward, you break the cycle. You can be in the video too. Once the cycle is broken, then it just goes full circle, because it continues on the right way of loving and honoring and serving Christ. And I want that for my whole family. Jesus helped me forgive the people that hurt me, my mom especially, because he allowed me to heal my heart and then allowed me to love her again. And once he took the hate away, he allowed the love to grow. And now I'm there. I'm there for her, trying to help her with whatever I can, financially, physically. She lives down the street from me. I make sure she eats. I make sure she's okay. And that was a relationship that I thought would never be restored. But only God did that, because he put me in a place where loving myself was wanting more for myself. And when I wanted more, I focused on the good, what I wanted, what I needed, how to get my family out of where we were and not living paycheck to paycheck. And here I stand, 35 years at work and no debt. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the woman that I've become, the mother that I am, the grandmother that I am, and even the daughter that I am. I'm proud of all of that.
Yeah, wasn't that awesome? Give it up for Anna, is her story, right? Yeah. I just think what an incredible story, and obviously, Anna, thank you so much. It is so brave to share that story. It's not easy to do that, and one thing that we talked about, I know, is, man, if there is even one person who found hope or learned something or identified with this story or whatever, their life got better in some kind of way, I think it was worth it. Absolutely. Right? And I think that would definitely be the case. I think there's probably at least more than one person here. So I'm so glad that you did that. And I just thinking about your story and how much you could have let the shame or the regret or the mistakes or whatever keep you in that cycle. And I know that we have, at this church, we have so many, especially like 20 and 30-year-olds who are, kind of jumping into their careers and doing this and that, and everything's about the job, or everything's about this, or everything's about this. What would you say, for anyone like that, and for your kids and for your grandkids, that you've learned is like, what's most important? What would you want for them, knowing what you've been through and what you've learned?
Well, the most important thing is that you can be forgiven for anything. That God's grace and his mercy can allow your heart to heal from anything. And learn to forgive those who have hurt you, because the hurt allows you to heal afterwards and to love so differently. Yeah. Loving my family, my husband, my children, my grandchildren, and teaching them that that is the most important thing, to push forward, knowing that when you love, Nothing can come between that.
That's good.
Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how much money you have, what kind of car you drive, none of that. Because in the end, when you can look at your family and know that you have loved them well, nothing is better than that. Even the people that hurt you, forgive them, move forward, heal, mend, restore, because God is in the restoring business.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good, right? That's so good. Oh my gosh, Anna, thank you so much. I love you. Let's give it up one more time for Anna. Woo-hoo. I had to hold it together now. Hold it together, everybody. We're going to be okay. All right. I'm super grateful for Anna and what she shared, and to have this story of what happens when you realize that you're forgiven and you're loved and you have worth, and how you can break that cycle and the difference that it makes in your life, and then the difference it starts to make in everybody's life around you. That is something that I want for everybody. I want that for everybody. And so to that end, I want to leave you with a few questions to ask yourself this week. And I want you to wrestle with these. I want you to think about these, and I want you to find a way to do something with them, okay? So, and as per some of the things we talked about earlier, here's the first question. Have I confronted my guilt and shame and regret? And for those of you who are still wrestling with it, you know that shame or that regret, you know when that voice asks you, who are you? That it brings something up. There's still something that you're carrying with you. There's still something that's affecting you and the people in your lives. You owe it to yourself, and you owe it to everyone in your life to finally confront this and to deal with it, to do the work of figuring out how to accept the grace of God in your life and to finally see yourself the way that God sees you. Not that voice that says, who are you? Why are you here? You don't deserve to be standing here. Look at what you did. You've got to confront this guilt and the shame and regret. You've got to deal with it. Here's the next question. What am I seeing more clearly that I couldn't see when I was younger? What am I seeing more clearly that I couldn't see when I was younger? There's so much that you now know. There's so much that you now see almost like it's crystal clear that you couldn't 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There's so much wisdom that's there. And think about what you now know that you wish you known. Like that you wish you had known when you were 15, that you had wished you known that when you were 21 or when you were 25. Think about how many people could benefit from that. Right? So think about, what am I seeing now more clearly than I was when I was younger? And I want you to take your answer to that. And I want you to take all the work that you're doing with your shame and your regret and confronting that, and ask yourself this next question. How can I give back what's been given to me? How can I give back what's been given to me? Because it's fine and it's great if you see clearly now the things that you couldn't have seen when you were younger. But now, how can you take that and give it back? One thing that we say around here a lot is the greatest thing that you can do with your life is to give it away. And so if you're older, the younger people in your life, they need you. Like, do you have people in your circle who you're teaching, who you're encouraging, who you're rubbing shoulders with? They need you. I want you to think about this. If you're 16, here's what you need to know. If you're 16, there are 22-year-olds who think you are so dumb, okay? And if you're 22, there are 30-year-olds who are looking at you and you're like, you're so dumb, okay? So all that to say, you need older people in your life, okay? You might think you've got it all right. You might think you're so smart. You think you got everything figured out. I'm telling you, you need these people in your life. And especially if you're older, and I would actually say this, if you're someone who's older and you are someone who would say, you know, I don't have like any particular talent. Like I can't think of like stuff that I'm really good at. I don't have these like razzle-dazzle abilities that people will be impressed with. Please hear me. We don't need your talent as much as we just need you. You know, we don't need you to impress us. We just need you. Like we need your presence, and we need your involvement. We need your engagement. We need your wisdom. And I think more than anything, We need your love. I would argue that not just the people in your life, obviously the people in your life, your family, like Anna was talking about, your family, the people who are most important to you. And I would say the people at this church need you. We've got a lot of dumb people here, myself included. Okay? I'm in that group. And we need you. And people here need you. And we need your wisdom. We need you to get involved. We need you to be engaged. We need you to give us the good stuff that you have. So to do this well, this thing, this life, to make the most out of it, to make something beautiful come out of your biggest mistakes or the toughest stuff that you've been through, I'm telling you, it's all about people and how you're putting it back into and loving and giving to people. The people and loving them, this is the best investment that any of us can make, no matter what you've been through. No matter what talents you have or don't have. And the thing is that the Apostle Paul, he didn't make the most of his life because he was so perfect and so amazing and so talented all the time. He did everything right. But it was by the grace of God. It was by the grace of God that he understood who he was and what he had to offer the people in his life. And by the grace of God, I want you to see who you are, what you have to offer to everyone in your life, including the people here. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for your grace. God, we thank you that no matter what we've been through, no matter what low points we've experienced in our life, no matter what challenges we've faced, no matter what mistakes we've made, no matter how much we may have messed this up before, no matter how much we might be messing it up now, God, I thank you that you have your grace there for us, that, God, you love us and you forgive us and you bring us back into your arms and you tell us who we are. So, God, I pray for every single person here today that you would remind us of who we are and that we could start to love the people in our lives out of that. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.